Nobody saw it coming. Not the thousands of fans packed into Court Suzanne Lenglen, not the players warming up on the red clay, not even the young woman sitting quietly in the players' box, wearing a white hoodie, her hair tied back, trying her hardest to disappear into the crowd. Nobody, absolutely nobody, could have predicted what was about to happen on the afternoon of May 27th, 2026 in Paris, France. And by the time it was over, there wasn't a dry eye in the stadium. But before we get there, let's talk about something equally extraordinary. Larry Bird, the man who once told defenders exactly where he was going to shoot from before draining the basket anyway. The man who talked his way through 3 NBA championships, the greatest trash talker the basketball world has ever seen. That man was recently left completely, utterly speechless. Why? Because Michael Jordan delivered a tribute so powerful, so unexpected, so deeply personal that even the most confident voice in NBA history had no response. And that story tells you everything you need to know about the kind of moment we're about to walk through. Because what happened at the French Open that afternoon wasn't about competition either. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about one legend stepping forward to honor another, and it changed everything. Now, when we talk about the French Open, we talk about clay court battles, Grand Slam glory, and the greatest tennis players on the planet. Roland Garros has hosted royalty, rock stars, and icons from every corner of the world. But when Asia's songbird, the legendary Regine Velasquez, arrived at the tournament, something shifted in the atmosphere. Because Regine isn't just a singer, she is a 56-year-old phenomenon who has performed for presidents, sold out Carnegie Hall, and spent decades being the voice of an entire generation of Filipinos. She is, without question, one of the most celebrated artists in Asian history, and yet, with all of those milestones behind her, she had never done anything quite like what she was about to do. She had never walked onto a tennis court, had never taken a microphone in front of thousands of live spectators to honor a young athlete, had never done something so beautifully unexpected that it stopped a Grand Slam tournament in its tracks, until now. The date was May 27, 2026. The clock read 4:47 p.m. on Court Suzanne Lenglen, and on a quiet Paris afternoon that seemed like any other, everything changed. To truly understand the weight of this moment, you have to understand what Alex Eala had just been through. Her French Open campaign was already over. A first-round defeat to Eva Jovic had ended her tournament run before it ever found its footing. The Philippine flags that had packed the stands only 24 hours earlier, flags carried by fans who had traveled thousands of miles just to watch her play, were now folded away, packed into suitcases, and being dragged toward departure terminals across Paris. The dream of a deep run at a Grand Slam had dissolved into the evening air, and Alex was left carrying the quiet, suffocating weight of what might have been. So she did what any heartbroken athlete might do. She went back to the courts, not to compete, not to be seen, but just to watch, to sit among the fans, to remind herself why she loved this sport, even on the days it delivered pain instead of triumph. She found a seat in the players' box with her mother beside her and her coaches a few rows back. White hoodie, hair pulled back, no makeup. She was doing everything possible to blend into the background. For the first time in days, she just wanted to be nobody, just another fan in the crowd, watching tennis and trying to breathe. Then the music started. And it wasn't the kind of music you expect to hear at Roland Garros. There was no stadium anthem blasting through the speakers, no pre-recorded track echoing off the stands. This was something else entirely, something intimate, something powerful, something that reached across the entire stadium and grabbed every single person by the chest. A voice rose from the center of the court, clear, unmistakable, impossible to ignore. Fans stopped mid-conversation, phones shot into the air. Even the players on court seemed to pause, turning toward the source of the sound with expressions caught somewhere between confusion and pure amazement. Standing near the baseline, microphone in hand, was Regine Velasquez. Asia's songbird had arrived at Roland Garros, and she hadn't come to watch, she had come to sing. And not just to fill the stadium with her legendary voice, she had come for one person specifically. She had come for Alex Eala. As her voice echoed through the stadium, a remarkable stillness settled over thousands of spectators. The cameras scanned the crowd rapidly, hunting for one face, and when they found Alex Eala sitting in the players' box, the emotion written across her face told the entire story. Her hand flew to her mouth. Tears immediately gathered in her eyes. She looked completely overwhelmed, like someone watching a dream and a memory collide at the exact same moment. Because Regine Velasquez wasn't just any singer to Alex. This was the voice that had accompanied her entire childhood, a voice she had grown up with, a voice that meant home. When the final note faded into the Paris afternoon, the stadium absolutely erupted. Thunderous applause rolled through Court Suzanne Lenglen as thousands of fans rose to their feet. But the performance, as breathtaking as it was, turned out to be only the beginning. Regine lowered the microphone, and then she started walking. With quiet purpose and unmistakable emotion in her eyes, she moved directly toward the players' box, straight toward the young woman who had become a symbol of pride and resilience for millions of Filipinos around the world. The stadium fell silent again as she approached. "Alex," she said, her voice gentle but strong enough for everyone to hear. "This is for you, not because you won, but because you fought, because you never gave up, because you reminded all of us that losing a match does not make you a loser." And then she extended her hand. For one brief, breathtaking moment, time stood completely still. Cameras caught every second of it. A generational voice standing on the famous red clay of Roland Garros, reaching out to a player whose tournament had ended far sooner than anyone had hoped. It was the kind of image that doesn't need a caption. Alex slowly rose from her seat. Her legs were trembling. Tears were streaming down her face. She reached forward and took Regine's hand, and in a barely audible whisper said, "I don't know what to say." Regine smiled warmly and pulled her close. "You don't have to say anything," she replied. "Just keep fighting. Keep being yourself. The rest will take care of itself." And then she pulled Alex into a full embrace, and the crowd lost it completely. Flags waved. Chants of support thundered across the stadium. The applause wasn't for a championship. It wasn't for a trophy. It was for something far more rare. Raw, human resilience on full display. The footage spread across the internet within hours. Millions of people shared it, and what they saw wasn't just an exchange between a singer and an athlete. What they saw was a reminder, a powerful, emotional reminder that character matters just as much as results, and that perseverance can move people even when the scoreboard says you lost. But the story didn't end on that court. The next morning, May 28, 2026, around 10 a.m., in a quiet cafe near Roland Garros, Alex Eala and Regine Velasquez sat across from each other for breakfast. It was their first real meeting before that week. A Filipino expatriate who owned the cafe recognized both women instantly, reserved a private room, placed plates of traditional Filipino breakfast dishes on the table, and then, respecting the weight of the moment, quietly stepped away and left them alone. Alex had barely slept. The loss still looped in her mind. The what-ifs were still alive. But sitting across from Regine, the woman whose voice had been the soundtrack to so much of her childhood, she felt something beginning to shift. "Thank you," she told her softly, "for making me feel like I hadn't failed." Regine reached across the table and took her hand. "You didn't fail, Alex," she said. "You lost a tennis match. That is not failure. Failure is giving up, and you have never done that. Then Regine opened up about her own journey in a way that clearly caught Alex off guard. She talked about albums that underperformed, shows that fell flat, critics who declared her irrelevant, moments in her career when she genuinely considered walking away from everything. Losing, struggling, making mistakes, Regine told her, that's just part of the journey. The question is whether you keep going. Alex asked her how she did it, how she kept going when everything felt impossible. And Regine's answer was simple. She went back to the beginning. She remembered why she started. The love, the joy, the people who believed in her before the world did. Then came the moment that would define the entire conversation. Alex lowered her eyes, and in a voice barely above a whisper, she admitted something she hadn't said out loud to anyone since arriving in Paris. "I'm scared, Tita Regine," she said. "I'm scared I'll never win a Grand Slam. I'm scared I'll always be remembered as the player who came close but never quite got there." The words hung in the air between them, heavy, honest, and achingly familiar to anyone who has ever dared to dream something enormous. Regine listened, and then she said the words that Alex and everyone who would eventually hear this story would never forget. Maybe you'll win a Grand Slam one day, and maybe you won't. But that's not what matters most. What matters is that you keep showing up, that you keep fighting, that you continue to inspire the millions of people who see a part of themselves in your journey. She squeezed Alex's hand. That's the Alex Eala effect, and you're already a champion in that regard. Their breakfast stretched for nearly 2 hours. They talked about music and tennis, about family and dreams, about what it means to carry a nation's hopes on your shoulders every time you step onto a court or a stage. Before they parted, Regine reached into her bag and handed Alex a small box. "Open it later," she said. That evening, alone in her hotel room, Alex carefully lifted the lid. Inside was a delicate gold necklace, a pendant shaped like the Philippines, and engraved on the back in small, elegant script were 6 words: "Laban always. You are not alone." Alex stared at it for a long moment. Then she placed it around her neck, and just like that, it became something much more than jewelry. It became a promise. 2 days later, on the morning of May 29th at 9:17 a.m., Alex arrived at Charles de Gaulle Airport. Officially, she was leaving Paris without a single victory, but emotionally, she was carrying more than most champions take home. Near the Philippine Airlines check-in area, a crowd had gathered. Not journalists, not photographers, not industry people, just ordinary Filipinos living and working abroad. Nurses, engineers, students, families. They held flags and handmade signs and fought back tears as she approached. "Alex, you made us proud. We'll be here when you come back. Laban always." She greeted every single one of them. And then, from the front of the crowd, a little girl, no older than 10 years old, stepped forward. In her hands was a sheet of notebook paper covered in crayon drawings, a tennis player beneath a Philippine flag wearing a bright yellow crown. The girl looked up nervously and extended the drawing. "I made this for you," she whispered. Alex accepted it carefully. She studied every imperfect crayon mark, every wobbly line, and standing in the middle of a crowded international airport thousands of miles from home, she felt tears rising in her eyes. Only this time, they weren't tears of disappointment. They were tears of pure, overwhelming gratitude. The little girl looked up at her one more time and smiled. "You're my hero," she said quietly. "Even when you lose." And those 6 words, 6 simple, honest, crayon-colored words from a 10-year-old girl in a Paris airport, hit harder than any trophy presentation, any standing ovation, and any championship podium ever could.